Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tennis Parents community. I'm Kay Gilbert, and our event this evening is part of a series of Q&A sessions of a group of over 2,000 tennis parents of tennis players training in the GB system who've joined together to pool their knowledge so that they can decide for themselves how best that they can support their own children in tennis. We're a volunteer-led independent group set up for the good of British tennis, and we collaborate with the LTA who help promote membership of the group. So if you're not already a member of the Facebook group, you can search for us online, and you can also find us on Instagram, and we have a YouTube channel where you can find recordings of the previous Q&A sessions. If you're not a parent of a junior player in the GB system, you can still access our content that way. So this evening, on the eve of Wimbledon, I'm delighted to welcome back Dave Sammel to the group. As some of you may remember, Dave was born and raised in South Africa with very supportive parents who encouraged their large family to be free-thinking and follow their dreams. Dave studied and played in the US and went on to become a professional tennis player before developing his long and successful award-winning career as a top-level tour coach, an author, a consultant, a mentor, and particularly an expert on mindset. All of this, and judging by his Instagram, he's also a bit of a master of the standing jump. Welcome, Dave.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'll explain the standing jump. I have two things that I do. If I can run 5 kilometers and keep jumping 45 centimeters, I feel like I'm in good shape or good enough shape. So they're my two exercises that I feel like it's my way of it's my little test to say that I'm still okay.
I'm seriously thinking most people are now pausing the recording to go off and try and see if they can do a standing jump of 45 centimeters. That sounds pretty high to me and pretty impressive. I mean, I've seen you doing it on Instagram and it was
Yeah,
pretty impressive.
yeah. It's something I've always done, and I just I'm curious to see how long I can keep doing it for. I'm 63 on Friday, uh, coming
Yeah.
up, so on the 5th of July. So if I can keep it going, let's see if I can do it at 70.
Well, that's a Wimbledon birthday, Dave. How appropriate.
Yeah, yeah, that's always
But
been.
let's
Uh,
let's let's find out a bit more about what you're doing right now, shall we? Whereabouts are you at the moment, and
um,
which British players are you working with? Anyone we might know?
well, yeah, I mean, you probably all know me for working with Liam Brody because I worked with Liam for close to 10 years. And at the end of last year, he made top 100 for the first time and started the year very well in Hong Kong, qualified, made second round and almost beat Rublev, had, set point, second set, and seemed really well on his way. But he hurt his ankle and he's pretty much been out since then. He had a little comeback in America, but the ankle wasn't right yet. So he's been injured for a long period of time. And a couple of months ago, Kyle Edmund approached me to work with him. So I
Ah,
started working with Kyle and Liam. And then 2 weeks ago, Liam called me and said, I've obviously had a lot of time out to think. And, you know, I've realized I've been with you for 10 years. That's a third of my life. And, we've done really, really well together. But I think maybe I'd like to try a different voice. And then I said to him, well, the moment you think that, you have to do it, because otherwise, every time you lose a match, you're going to be thinking, maybe I should get, get a different voice. And possibly that is the right thing, because everything that I know, I've given him over the 10 years. Of course, he is disrupting the stability that he's had over this period of time. But I think he needs to find out for himself whether something else can give him something more than we've already achieved. And it's we've achieved a lot last year. People may remember he beat Casper Ruud on center court, made the third round for the second year running. So it was a very successful relationship. But now I'm working with Kyle, and that's an exciting project because obviously Carl was top 20 in the world and has had terrible injury problems. But I think hopefully those are behind him now, and I think it was very much a case of getting his head in the right space, because it's very difficult to go back to futures when you played the big courts in the world and beaten Djokovic at the Masters 1000 in Madrid and made semi-finals of Australian Open, to get your head around starting at a very low level again, and being enthusiastic and understanding that you have to suffer and still do the work and find a way back. So
a different set of challenges, and that leads me on to the next
yeah.
question, really, asking you about the players that you've coached over the years. Does one size fit all for mental skills, or is this really something that's very specific? How do the different players differ?
I mean, it's very specific. Whilst a lot of the problems are the same, the way you talk to different players does vary. Personalities vary greatly. I mean, I've gone from one extreme to another, where Liam is very talkative and Carl is much more reserved. So it's a different kind of conversation. It's I always have like an onboarding kind of interview, for want of a better word, where I ask players questions, what's their dream still, what their ambitions are, how do they think they can get there, what do they think they need to do, and get a full picture of what they think, and then start to talk to them about what I believe I can add to what they need. And then obviously observing them playing matches and stuff like that, you get more and more information as to what they need. But tennis players are like fingerprints. I mean, there's no two exactly the same. And so you have your broad philosophy. I mean, so I know what I want them to learn as tennis players and understand as tennis players, and that philosophy doesn't change that much. But from within that philosophy, if you think about it, it's like almost having a style of play, but within that style of play you can have a number of different tactics, but you don't go away from your style of play, and as a coach you don't go away from your philosophy of what good tennis is. But within that philosophy you have to have tweaks, because if a player has certain weaknesses or certain strengths, the way they can deliver the philosophy is different.
That's really interesting, and I think certainly you could just write a book, couldn't you, if it was as simple as this is the recipe, go off and make the cake. It's that's really what coaching is all about, isn't it? And I'm wondering how you think that develops in terms of a parent's relationship with a player as they are bringing up a child. Is it a similar thing? Is there a big age transition where a coach is much more taking that role on? What's your view on that?
Again, every journey is very individual. I think a lot depends on how much knowledge the parent has about tennis. If you don't have too much knowledge, I think a parent needs to be more of a supporter, and obviously, the financier and the taxi driver, and the stability behind the player. I think it's really important for parents to learn very quickly to treat their kids pretty much the same, whether they've won or lost matches. Look, tennis is something you're trying to do and trying to play well, but you're still my son, you're still my daughter, and I love you no matter what. And tennis is just something we're going after to try and become very, very good at it. But it's not who you are. It's what you do. It's not who you are. And I think parents have to always remember is that, you know, if they play tennis very well, that's great. If they don't play very well, you know, it's disappointing. You know, you can be disappointed for them. You can't be disappointed in them. As long as they're trying hard, that's all they can do. And this game involves so much losing that if you get on that roller coaster of, you know, the kid is, especially when they're very young, you know, what happens is the emotions start to smooth out a little bit as they get older. But when they're very young, it's like this. And if the parent is also going like this, I mean, it's just the, you know, it's almost like doubling the wave of what happens. And the parent needs to try and be very, very stable, and the kid is oscillating around your stability.
And the coach as well, or is that a different?
And absolutely the coach. I think the one thing that I'm most proud of, and any player that's worked with me, and you know, even as a head coach of the Bath Academy for many years, nobody can ever will ever come and say, wow, you know, Dave was up and down. I showed up the same every single day. And that, I think, is a very, very powerful statement to players and to other coaches that, you know, your job is to be stable. And you know, if again, it's very rare for a kid to be deliberately doing something to annoy you, or you know, you know, they might get a bit boisterous or something like that, and then you know, you got to be there just like, hey, you know, you know, calm down, you know, let's just get on with this or whatever. But you can't personally get annoyed if a kid irritates you, because they're not trying to irritate you. You know, they're young. They're going to do things. You know, you can say, stop banging the ball around, and they'll bang it around again. You know, like, you know, and then you can have I always had a very simple disciplinary strategy. Is if somebody was not, was disrupting a group or whatever, I just say to them, leave the court for 5 minutes and minimum, and then you decide when you want to come back. But if you come back, you know what you have to do. And you explain that to the kids, that when you send them off court, they take a minimum of 5 minutes, and then they decide if they don't feel like playing tennis that day, they don't come back. It's fine, but if they take 20 minutes and come back, then I just include them back into the lesson without any discussion, now I hope you've learned your lesson, or nothing. It's just, okay, let's go again. They've decided that they're ready to play now, that they're ready to do what's needed. And I've always found that incredibly powerful. I've only had it twice in my whole coaching career where somebody came back and then had to be sent off again, because they made the decision for themselves. And I've always said, if we can all have bad days. We just don't feel like playing or whatever. And if you feel you need a rest or whatever, and you leave and don't come back, it's fine. And the next day when they come back, it's not like, oh, you're not putting out, you're not, whatever. Which is, I think, is very important. So stability, parents, coaches, stabilizing forces, I would say, is huge key. I think another big key for parents to learn is, don't tell, ask. Okay, so, what do you think you could have done better there? Or, I noticed you seemed very upset in the match. What was going on there? And let them talk. Don't tell them what they were doing, because you might be wrong. And what's the point? The more the better players can get at explaining themselves and how they feel, the more you can actually help them.
I suppose that's part of their autonomy as they're getting older as well. And I would also think there is a right time to talk to a child, isn't there? Not necessarily the minute they've come off a court, perhaps, or depending on the child.
I mean, and this is an amazing stat. This was in America. They did a study of all kids that quit tennis. I think it was under the age of 16. 70% of them made that decision in the car ride home, because they just couldn't stand the car ride home anymore. The constant questioning and the lectures and all of that in the car ride home, and that's where they made the decision to quit tennis. So I think, but people ask me a lot, like, when do you talk to a player after a match? Well, I will say to a player, how long do you need after a match to talk? Some players want to talk right after, but they say that, but they just want to vent right after, and that's fine. And once they've vented, and you can see that they've now kind of talked their way out and they've come down, then you can start to maybe ask them a couple of questions, or get permission to give them an opinion. So, I mean, I will do this a lot with the players. Okay, would you like to hear my opinion? If they say yes, then they've given you permission, and then they're going to listen. If they say no, you say, okay, well, whenever you're ready to have my opinion, let me know. But I also want to allow players to go more than an hour without being able to speak about the match.
Okay.
Sometimes, if it's a really particularly disappointing loss, really, really tough, I will say to them, would you like to talk about this tomorrow?
Okay.
If they say yes, then I will leave it. But normally, I mean, when I can, and then I've done this many times, they've lost a match, and I say, come on, let's go straight, and we go straight on the practice court. Because the first 10 minutes of the practice is usually pretty bad, because they get, they're getting rid of the match. But then immediately you say, okay, what did you think of your slice backhand in that match? And they go, oh, it was gunk. I said, well, let's do some work on it now. And so immediately get the brain thinking forward again. And sometimes those have turned into, like, hour and a half session that's been a great session, and they come off feeling $1 million again, and they've just lost the match.
And I guess there it is in a nutshell, really, isn't it? That we can all play the game of tennis, and sometimes play it really well, and sometimes not play it well. And even straight after a situation where you've been in a match, you can turn up on a court and hit the best forehands of your life. So is that really what we're talking about here? The difference between technical, physical, tactical, and mental? You're an expert in the mental side of tennis, but obviously you're teaching those other elements as well.
Yeah.
Is it as simple as those four things, or is that really entwined?
They're totally intertwined. And what I just want to take one step back first is if I said to anyone in this group, have you ever purposely performed badly at anything?
It's a good question.
I mean, I don't think many people would go, yeah, or do you consistently, go out and sabotage yourself, or do you consistently go out and not try? People don't do that. So when you accuse a player of not trying hard enough, you're really getting into hitting a real hurtful nerve, because it's highly unlikely that anybody goes out on purpose to play badly, or goes out on purpose to not try their best. Okay. And if they're playing badly, nobody says, oh, I'm going to go into this meeting and see what a crap job I can do. It just doesn't happen. People go, and things go wrong, and it doesn't turn out well, but it's not because you did it on purpose. So, kids don't lose on purpose. They don't double fault match points on purpose. neither do the best players in the world. Roger Federer didn't hit a very short approach shot to Novak Djokovic on match point at Wimbledon on purpose, to get past. When players get tight, they make mistakes, and it doesn't matter what level they are. So accusing players of not trying hard enough, or not wanting, how can you miss that forehand at that time? Well, if they knew, they wouldn't have missed it. And even if they do know, they still didn't miss it on purpose, because that's what happens. But getting back to your question about the physical and the technical and mental, it's all intertwined. And again, with the mental skills that I work with players and parents and coaches with, a lot of people say it's all in the mind. Well, it's all in the mind at every level. But you cannot, competency as a tennis player is very, very important as well. You can't take somebody who's 1,000 in the world and say, okay, you've got a chance of going on center court and beating Novak Djokovic, because they're just not good enough as tennis players at that point in time. So they could be mentally the strongest person on the planet, and you have real proof of this, because Michael Jordan, who is arguably, the greatest basketball player that ever lived, who is mentally known to be so competitive and tough, and people who've watched the Netflix series see what he's made of, is he tried to play baseball. Now, athletically, I'm sure good enough. I'm sure if he had focused on baseball from a young age only, he might have made it in baseball. But in a way, he learned a very valuable lesson in humility, that it was disrespectful to those baseball players who have honed their skills over 10 years, just like he honed his basketball skills over 10 years, to then say, oh, I can come and learn this in 6 months. But it was not a mentality issue or a confidence issue. He just would need a lot longer to learn those skills, and maybe miss the window to even be able to learn them. So, it's not all mental, but at every level it is mental, because if you're playing on the same level as somebody, whether it's, under 10 group 3 or under 12 group 1s, if that's your level, then who wins those tournaments comes down to confidence, belief, mentality, ability to deal with pressure, and that is pretty much all mindset.
That's an interesting one, Dave, because the first question we had in from a parent, and there are some parents missing, I think, on the Zoom tonight because of the football that's going on. But I'll ask the question for them, and hopefully they'll catch it the recording. So Roshana has asked, how can you help a 10-year-old to concentrate on winning in a tie break or at match point, those clutch points? What advice would you give to Roshana, Dave?
Yeah, just getting my notes up here, because I actually looked at this. I mean, first of all, what would be very helpful is a very simple game plan. Because for a young kid to kind of know what to do in that situation is helpful. And a very simple game plan is, if you're returning, return deep middle. If you're serving, serve, if they hit a half decent return, hit that deep middle as well. Obviously, if they give you a very easy ball, you can, maybe, try and do something more with it. But even a deep middle ball is very underestimated as a tactic. But what it does in a very tight situation is actually give the other player a chance to lose. So often players feel like they have to do something very proactive rather than actually getting the ball in deep middle and forcing the other player to do something with it. And then, you can keep going, deep cross court if that's, if they've hit your forehand or backhand, and just try to have big targets until you get a really easy ball to really do some damage with. And that little bit of patience, which can start just with that first ball that goes deep middle, can really help the kid, because they got something to do then. It's not like, oh, it's a big point, I need to do something. What? And they just hit it and try to go for a winner, or, is if they know, big point, go deep middle for
So
one.
you're taking away some of that decision making under
Correct.
pressure, when everything else is going on in their mind about, gosh, I might win this. Here I am, my moment. You're taking away that decision making a little bit, perhaps.
Yeah, but I mean, Novak Djokovic has made a pretty good living out of it, because I mean, he returns deep middle a lot, or he aims deep middle a lot. If he's a bit late, he hits sometimes a good line, or he's a bit early, it's a good cross court. Especially off a first serve, he's aiming middle all the time, and most of the best players in the world are aiming middle, because it's so tough to direct. I mean, they're so skilled that, if a ball is in the slot and they suddenly feel it, then they can go for it and do something different. But at a young age, I think if you can keep it very simple in their head, it's very helpful. And the last thing about that is, they need to remember, if they're feeling very, very nervous and it's a clutch point, they must remember that their opponent will be feeling the same. So someone say, my opponent's feeling the same, so I'm going to give him or her a chance to lose. I'm going to hit middle. And that can take a lot of stress out of them, because they know exactly what they have to do. So yeah,
and then, I know it's something I used to talk to my children about as well, when they come say, I played so badly, I can't believe I was this, and me.
Yeah.
And well, how do you think the other person played? And there's kind of like, oh, I haven't really thought about it. For a young child, often it is very self-absorbed, isn't it?
Yes, and I think that's the change that happens as players mature, is they're starting to understand that they need to look across the court and see what's happening there as well. But that doesn't happen until, and players mature at different ages, for sure. I mean, I always say you need to be 28 in your head to be a good tennis player. Some people are 28 when they're 28. Nadal was 28 when he was 18, on the court, in terms of their maturity on court.
Oh, fascinating. Well, I've got another question. So that's more about this sort of the clutch points and the end of the match. What about before the match? So this question came from Jane, and Jane's not on the call either at the moment, but she's asked, what are the strategies for dealing with nerves before a match?
I'd say the first thing is to reframe nerves. It's having a fundamental understanding that nerves are the reason why you play tennis, why you compete in tennis. So you can play tennis just for the feel of the ball and for hitting the ball and everything. But if you want to compete, which most people do, the reason you compete is to feel nerves. It's the same reason people go on huge roller coasters, same reason people do sky jumps, bungee jumps. All of these things are to feel the nerves, which make us really feel alive, and to overcome these nerves and actually do something that we were so nervous to do. That's the attraction. The attraction of sport is the nerves. It's competing, so you get to that place where you literally, with sport, the nerves come from not knowing what's going to happen. You really don't know. And those who are watching the football probably wouldn't have thought that England, I don't know how it's going, but they're almost about to lose to Slovakia. But you just don't know. And that's why, even for any game, any match, it would be strange not to be nervous if you're playing at a level similar to yours. I mean, you know, if I go on and play a beginner, I'm not going to be nervous because they can't beat me. Again, the skill level is too different. But am I going to enjoy that? No chance. The matches everybody enjoys are the ones where you just don't know what the outcome is. So players need to accept the nerves and understand it's the reason why they play. And therefore, it's actually exciting to have the nerves because you're now playing at a level where, you know, you don't know the outcome, but neither does your opponent. And you need to be excited to see how much you can improve your game whilst you're nervous. So, and what I mean by that is, you know, you've got to become good at playing tennis when you're nervous. You know, the best players in the world play nervous tennis better than others. So under pressure, when they're feeling very nervous, they can still hit deep middle. They can still give the player, you know, and of course, when the adrenaline kicks in, sometimes they can even play better when they're nervous than otherwise. So you're actually, when you're nervous, you're training yourself to play tennis nervous. And every time you're nervous, it's an opportunity to get better at playing nervous. And the goal is to become very good at playing when you're nervous. So don't see nerves as a bad thing. See them as, you know, the real or we'll say the sweet spot of why you play, and it's what you want to feel, and then the real challenge and the fun is how long is it going to take me to get really good at playing when I'm nervous.
And I guess that has to hold with you right the way through, not just on the first point or at the end of the first set, or it's got to be right at that final moment. You've still got to be able to not suppress that, but accept it and play in spite of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word embrace gets a bit of a bad name now because people use it so much, but it is effectively saying, you know, I'm doing this because of the nerves. You know, I'm going to on this roller coaster because of the nerves. You know, otherwise people go on the little roller coaster. Nobody's lining up to go on the little roller coaster who's an adult because it's not exciting.
Well, I wonder if that's also, I mean, I'm sure a lot of parents are relating to this nervousness watching their children play. So
yeah, and you have to get used to watching nerves and create some skills and stuff for yourself to be able to do it in a calmer way. But you're never going to be totally calm watching your kid. It's impossible. There's too much emotional involvement there. But that's okay.
Part of it, yeah.
But learn how to control it because you're expecting your kid to be cool under pressure. You cannot be pacing and, you know, smoking 20 cigarettes or hanging from a tree or hiding behind, you know, things and moving because they want to. I remember there was a parent who would take a step to the right whenever their kid won a point and a step to the left, and so they lost a lot of points. The parent would be like going around the court and coming back around because of this, you know, taking one step, the superstition that, you know, to try and, you know, get as many steps going the one way than the other way. But of course, the kid knew and got more and more nervous when it was going the wrong way.
There's a lot of energy there, isn't there? And it's direction of that. So Stuart asked the next question again. Stuart's perhaps immersed in the football, but we'll hopefully listen back. So Stuart asked, he's looking for tips for a 10-year-old in controlling what he describes as perfectionism, and then because of the desire for perfectionism, his behaviour's changing. So, for example, tapping his racket and so forth. Any tips for Stuart there?
I would say to the 10-year-old, do you like playing tennis? And they're going to say yes. I say, well, you want everything to be perfect. Yes. Okay. Well, tennis is a sport of mistakes. the best players in the world make 46%, lose 46% of their points. Players that are like 45 in the world are often losing more matches than they win. They just happen to have winning streaks that help their ranking. So if you're looking to be perfect in a sport that is impossible to be perfect in because it's full of mistakes, really and truthfully, the job of a tennis player is to try and find a way for their opponent to make 3% more mistakes than them. That's how thin the margins are. If you win 53% of the points, you're almost certainly going to win. You know, it's a weird sport, tennis, where you can win 52% and still lose. But 53 is pretty much you're going to win. So, and it's, if the greatest players that ever lived have an average of 54% win-loss ratio on points, and players who are 25 in the world are losing 50% of their matches, and also maybe 50% of their points, you cannot say that you like the game of tennis if you want to be a perfectionist, because it's not the sport of perfectionism. It's a sport of managing mistakes. So if you get the child to understand that the game of tennis is learning how to manage your mistakes and to play well enough that your opponent makes more mistakes than you. Now, that is the game of tennis. If you don't want to play this game, and you want to play a game where you can win 100% of the points, well, that's not tennis. You have to play another sport that, and I don't know if there is one, where it is possible to have a perfect score. But the game of tennis is about managing mistakes. So if you want to be a perfectionist in tennis, you're actually saying, I don't like the game. I want the rules of tennis to change. You know, this is not the sport I want to play. Well,
yeah, fascinating. I think you know, I'm thinking of gymnastics and things like that, where you do, or ice skating, where you are seeking perfectionism. But yes, of course, in tennis, you know, it's about adapting to the losses rather than trying to iron them all out. I'm going to skip the next two questions on the list, Dave, because I think we've answered those already in what you've told us. My next question for you is from a parent who says they've got a 9-year-old child that needs to work, who's been told that they need to work on their court presence. And they're wondering what they can do to encourage court presence. Perhaps you could explain what that might mean as well for people who aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would actually, I mean, 9 is very young, but you can ask the child is, you know, when you're on the court, how do you feel? You know, and you know, when you got very young kids, it's almost got to be a multiple choice thing. How do you feel? They go, oh, I don't know. Say, okay, do you feel scared? You know, do you feel strong? Do you feel weak? Do you feel, you know, and give them a you know, something to choose from, which is important, and then you can work from there. Or and the, you know, who's telling the kid that they don't have presence? If you've noticed it as a parent, then you can say, you know, do you think, okay, if you know, do you feel strong on the court? And the kid goes, yes. And you say, okay, do you feel like you look strong on the court? And then if the kid says yes, say, well, shall I video you? Again, get permission. Shall I video you? And let's see if you can make yourself look even stronger on the court. So don't say, you know, I'll video you, see you look weak. No, say, okay, I see, you know, show me and tell me what you think makes you look strong here. And even if it's made up in their heads or whatever, that's fine. It's like, okay, would you like to look even stronger? Now, I think a kid's going to say yes. All right. Now, body language actually is your gateway to mental strength. So many people think it starts in the mind, but it actually starts in the body. Because if you put your shoulders back and you keep your chin up, you're going to feel stronger. And it's very hard to go, my backhand is so useless, I'm terrible, if you're standing up nice and strong. To, what you say in your head has to be congruent with what your body's showing. And if you stand up straight like this and go, I'm terrible, it's not going to have the same impact because your brain's going, this doesn't feel right. I'm terrible. Yes, that feels right. So when, I really try to work with players a lot on body language from the aspects that you want to be mentally tough. The first step to mental toughness is getting control of your body language. So you might miss a really easy ball on set point and the emotion hits and it's like, oh no, but before you play the next point, you've got to get up strong again. And if you look at the top players in the world, they carry themselves very strong all the time. It's just become they've created this habit. So even if they do talk a bit negative in their heads, if they don't mirror it with the body language, it won't affect them as badly. So if you stand there and go, oh, I can't believe how much I'm missing, to I can't believe how much I'm missing, one's going to make you feel even worse. One like this is going to, it's not the best self-talk, but it is not going to affect you nearly as badly. So, it's really important that you get the answer from the kid, because if the kid perceives themselves as strong and you go, no, you're weak, you're creating a problem that isn't there. Their perception of what strong is needs to be reframed. And then you say, and then the gateway to that is, yeah, but imagine if you could be even stronger. Would you like that? Now the kids, yes. Okay, well, what happens if you put your shoulders even further back? And the kid might have been walking around like this thinking he's got straight shoulders, but it doesn't matter. So how does that feel? Well, so if you did that, you'd be even stronger. And it's really important to not create mental problems that aren't there by pointing out the weakness.
I suppose there's also a push and pull in terms of momentum in a match between the two players. So the stronger you're looking, that's a little bit, perhaps, I don't know, is the right word to use intimidating for the other player, that they're thinking, wow, he looks really confident here, and I'm not feeling so confident,
Yes.
So it's, I'm often interested by the mental side of tennis, because I feel like we talk a lot about developing mental skills, but also there's a side of this that is the impact it has on the opponent's confidence, isn't there? It's like the evil side, if you like, of the mindset. That you
but also the players need to understand that the body is what they visibly see. So if the body language is off, your opponent's going to see it. And, if someone's beating you, but they suddenly start, and you can see them getting all nervous and fidgety and everything like that, it gives you a bit of confidence. Oh, maybe. And if you're like this and then you win a couple of points and the momentum starts to switch, it can switch very fast then, because the player's body language is betraying how nervous and how scared they are when they're ahead. So, you're 100% correct. It works both sides. But we're human, so it's not about the kid never ever having, if you miss an easy overhead on set point or something like that, the emotion is going to hit very fast and the disappointment will hit a kid very quick. But there has to be a cutoff point. As I say, go towel off or go pick up a ball. But when you pick up the ball and turn around, now it's like you're getting ready for the next point. That's the cutoff point to get ready to go again, and the body language must be repaired then. You need to repair it before you play the next point.
That's great advice, Dave. I mean, believe it or not, we're coming into the last quarter of the session already.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to sort of jump around a bit with the questions that we've had, perhaps put a few of them together. One of the topics that comes up a lot from parents is the incorrect line calling in junior tennis and the impact that has on the child who's on the receiving end of the error. Now that we could debate all night whether those mistakes are genuine or not, and we all know some are and some aren't. But how would you advise a child to cope with the mental stress involved of bad line calls?
I mean, this is so rough, and it's why it gets to parents so much, because perceived or actual cheating is horrible. And as a parent, you have to make the judgment that I think the healthiest way is say, look, all right, this happens. It's horrible. It's awful. I wish it would never happen, but it's life and it does happen. Ultimately, cheating doesn't last, because eventually you have umpires and it goes away. And eventually, if you get to a high level, you got Hawkeye and it definitely goes away completely. And every player has had to deal with cheating in the history of the sport. So it's almost like a rite of passage. You have to go through it, and you will lose some matches that you probably would have won because of the cheating. But there's enough matches out there for you to win. That's not going to stop you becoming a very good tennis player. You'll have these horrible disappointments where you do lose a match because of cheating. And I really feel for you. And I know it's horrible for me watching, it's horrible for you playing. It's just a horrible part of tennis. But always hang on to the fact that A, you can win against cheating if you play well enough and fight hard enough. And B, if you do lose, it's not going to destroy your career. It's taken one tournament away from you, possibly. But ultimately, as you get older, it will disappear. And if you're good enough, you will come through anyway. This will not stop you from being a good tennis player. And that's the healthiest way of dealing with it. The other way, which is a personal decision with parents, is say, well, look, if they, 3 strikes and out, in terms of, if they cheat you once, you say, hey, I thought that was good. Twice, hey, that's twice. If you do it again, then we're going to have to start playing tennis according to your rules. And if they do it again, then you start taking points yourself. But I mean, sometimes there's many kids who just can't do that. And I'm not saying it's a very personal decision that parents and kids have to come to do that. I don't believe it's the healthiest way, but it is the only other way to deal with it. If you're saying, I'm going to try and beat the cheat on this day by not allowing them to get away with it without taking points back myself.
I mean, I'm thinking along the lines of maybe forcing them to make the error as well. You could switch your mindset, say, okay, this isn't going to be the sort of game I'm used to playing, but I'm going to challenge myself to win every point by forcing them to make an error rather than hitting an amazing shot near a line.
Yeah. I mean, again, the mindset's got to be, in my opinion, is today the test of tennis is to beat the cheat. How am I going to do that? It's like, today the test is to play the best tennis I can play in the wind, or on a court with with dodgy bouncers or whatever it is. It's the challenge of the day. And you'll come through some of those challenges and you won't other of those challenges. And I think, no player hasn't come through because their career was cheated off of them. Because as you get older, it does disappear.
Well, I'm sure that parents are very pleased to know that. A question as a sort of probably the final one we've time for, and I would like, please, parents who are on the call tonight, put anything in the chat or raise a hand if you want to ask a question of Dave. Another one I had in from a parent is, any thoughts on how to approach playing someone you've always lost to in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what greater challenge is there? And you've been practicing. So if you lost them 2 months ago, you've had 2 months of practice to get better. So go and test, are you good enough now to beat them? And every time you play them and you lose, pick one thing that you feel was the biggest difference between yourself and them, and go and practice that and get really good at it. And then the next time say, well, I'm really curious to see how it goes this time, because my forehand cross court's a lot better now than it was when I played you last. So is this the answer? And if it's not the answer, then it's, again, this is a puzzle that you have to figure out. And losing to somebody over and over again is fine if you're just working to get better and better and challenge them and find a way to beat them. And Jimmy Connors lost to Borg many times. I think 11 times in a row, I think, but then he beat him the 12th time, but it happened to be a pretty big match, like the US Open final. And he, his mother, I think, always said to him was, you don't lose tennis matches, you just run out of time before you solve the problem. And I think that's just a fantastic coaching tip, is like, you don't lose, you just ran out of time before you solve the problem. And that's how you should see. So, if you lose someone 10 times in a row, you haven't solved the problem yet. But every time you go out there and practice and get better, you got to believe that eventually you will solve the problem of little Millie or little Molly or little Charlie. Because if you keep doing it, you probably will solve that problem.
I guess also the other players worked out the problem of how to beat you. So, for example, when I play tennis, I'm not very good returner on my backhand. So guess what? People give me lots of backhands to practice.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're constantly, by sort of having weaknesses that are exposed, you're constantly having to really face up to those and address them, aren't you?
Yeah, and you have to find workarounds. I mean, maybe you can try and position yourself different and run around your backhand more, and force them to, serve wider and wider, and say, okay, I know my backhand's not that strong, but I'm going to find a way, as much of a workaround as I can, while I work on getting a slightly better backhand return. Because all players have weaknesses. I think that's where tennis is changing. The difference between weaknesses and strengths at higher levels is shrinking. It's not quite as pronounced. But there will always be weaknesses in players and strengths.
Amazing. Well, Dave, you always say such great things that when I try to take a sound bite out of these Q&As, I've always spoiled for choice with all of your wise words. So thank you so much for giving us your time this evening. Would you like to tell us a bit? I'm going to put a link into the chat for people. Would you like to tell us a bit about the work that you're doing at the moment and how perhaps parents can engage with you?
Yes, I have a thing called the Locker Room, which is off my book, Locker Room Power, which you can get on Amazon. um, and it's a parent and a parent group, a parent and coaches group, where we meet once a month for 90 minutes. And I often bring on special guests, Carl's been on, Liam's been on, Matt Little, who trains Andy Murray. I mean, I will get many guests on, but the guests will do a 20-minute slot, and then if they want to stay on, they can, a Q&A. But then people bring, parents will bring specific problems that they're dealing with their kids, and then I will give my expertise. Maybe the guest will, and other parents in the group who've maybe, or coaches who've experienced this, will give their opinion about it, and it's about solving problems. Occasionally, if there's an issue with the kid that is particularly either sensitive or too long to deal with in the group, then I will do a one-on-one with the parent and the kid as well, to really try and lay a foundation in a specific area, to try and get them to think about things differently and go about things differently. So it is a pretty small group of people, and it's all about dealing with things like scheduling. A really, really tough thing to do is to schedule properly. When do you go on holiday? When do you do this? How many tournaments should the kids play? Just stuff like this, or, how many times should they do physical training? How do you find a good physical trainer? What are you looking for? So, there's so many things and your group is helping as well. This is why everybody is here, is to get expertise and help from people who've been in the sport a long time and pretty much seen it all, and learn and get better. So yeah, I mean, if the link will take them through to tell them more about the group. Everything is recorded, so they can always go back, and I have a Google Drive that I put in additional material as well. Plus, they get Mindset College, which is my online course, which is over 20 hours of material.
Amazing. Well, anybody listening on catch up to this recording, you can find that at www.mindsetcollege.co.uk and drill down into the different menus to find the services Dave offers on a consultancy basis. Have we got any questions from the parents? Just one more try in case anyone's got anything they'd like to ask. One of the parents has put in the chat, this has been incredibly helpful. Thank you for organising and for giving up your time. So thank you, David, again from Jim there. And yes, lots more thank yous come in. So I think
there was my 9-year-old has a tendency to lower level to opponents. She may lose to kids that aren't yet as strong, and then win 4-love with the first seed. How can we avoid this? I got bad news, you can't. What you can do is hopefully get to a place where it happens less often. It's a very common thing, because when you play somebody who's supposedly better, there's less pressure. Got nothing to lose, so the player is going to be more relaxed. But often, if they get ahead against a better player, then they suddenly realize that they can win, and then they start to get nervous and tighten up. I would say then you've got to have your little game plan in place to help deal with those nerves. And, I've got something, a freebie that I give out as well called the 4-step reset, which is how to operate between points to try and calm the mind down and get, like I said, the cutoff point where you're ready to play again. Because basically what happens to kids is, if they blow a lead, they think in their head, oh, I've blown a lead and everything. They're in the past. And if they're close to winning, they start thinking, if I win this, then I'm going to get chosen for this team, and then blah, 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 blah. And then in the future, and while they're in the future or while they're in the past, I always say to them, who's on the court playing for you? Your body's there, but your mind is not there. So the most important thing you have to do in your life at that point in time, when you're nervous, is to focus on what you've got to do then. That's the most important thing. There's nothing else that you have to do other than to focus on that next point, because it's the only thing that's really important to you in that moment in time. And that sometimes can help them say, just remember what's important, the next point, nothing else. And again, these tools are not magic. You have to learn how to use them over and over again and get it better and better at using them. But it still doesn't guarantee the win, because you have an opponent on the other side who can do things that can take the game away from you. So, there's no magic cure for any of this. It's all about learning how to manage it better and better, and therefore winning a few more matches than you lose, and getting on a few more winning streaks that take your ranking forward. But to the highest level of the game, pretty much, is, it's only the top sort of 4 players that win like 70% of their matches. Everybody else, from about 15 down, it's around the 50% mark. So the very best players in the world are losing a lot. Kids are going to lose a lot, and it's managing all of that.
We've got another question in the chat, Dave. It feels like my child has more trouble closing out matches from a winning position and plays better when she's losing and chasing the match. How do we help her get better at closing things out? And I guess that's a very similar space, isn't it, that you're talking about?
Yes, I mean, because the finish line is there. Again, the view of this has to change to where, okay, it is difficult. It's more difficult closing out a winning position. Why? Because the player who's behind has nothing to lose anymore. So they relax, and often they play better. So it's not just the fact that you play worse. You might be forced to play a bit worse because the other player is suddenly hitting better shots and everything because they've got nothing to lose anymore. So you're not always in control. But what you can say is, look, when this happens to me, or when I'm feeling really nervous to finish off a match, okay, this is what I've got to learn how to do. So every time I'm in this position, I'm not scared of it. I love it, because the more I'm in this position, the better I'm going to get at doing it. The better I'm going to get at finishing it. The better I'm going to get at dealing with when the other player just starts, teeing off on the ball and making a lot of shots. I'm not going to panic, because I know if I panic, I got no chance. So, but I'm not going to panic, and I'm going to just keep fighting and see if I can hold them off. And even if they get square, you 5-2 up and they get 5-all, the pressure then switches, because suddenly they've got something to lose as well. And so it's not always that, if somebody comes from 5-2 down to 5-all, they're not in the stronger position, because the pressure suddenly switches. It's not that easy to swing so easily now. So the players have to understand that when these things happen, it's their chance to learn how to deal with it. and to remember that when a player comes back on you, you're still probably in the driver's seat because they're suddenly going to feel the pressure. And you've been dealing with this pressure for 3 games. They're suddenly dealing with it then. And you often find that players come back to like 5-all, but then they lose 7-5 or they lose 7-6 because they suddenly aren't playing as free. And this is part of the game. And I think if parents can just encourage their kids over and over again to accept this is the game of tennis. And what you like about it is how difficult it is. What you like about it is you have to learn how to deal with all of these situations many times over before you get pretty good at it. And the best players in the world are still working, trying to get better at it. But I can tell you, you can look on the Pro Tour every single week. There's a lot of tournaments. I'll guarantee you there's been people who've been, a set and 5-1 up and lost. Have been, 5-4, 40 love serving for a match and lost their serve. You're going to see Wimbledon the next 2 weeks. You're going to see people blow enormous leads because it's difficult when the other player starts just swinging. So they're not alone in this. It's part of the sport. The biggest thing is to never let this stuff start to beat you down to where you don't want to play tennis because of it. If you really, really don't like it, then you mustn't play tennis because you obviously don't like the game of tennis, which is dealing with these challenges.
No, amazing, Dave. Well, I said we'd stick to around about an hour, and we've done just that. We could go on all night. Everything you're saying makes so much sense, and it's really quite energizing. I hope everybody has enjoyed the session with you tonight, and do have a look on Mindset College if you'd like to see some more of Dave's work and look
at my email, david@mindsetcollege.co.uk. Fire over any questions. I'm happy to help.
That's really kind of you, Dave. Well, thank you very much. And I think the parents have enjoyed it too, seeing lots of praise coming in. So I'll stop the recording now. Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.
Good night. Thanks very much.